So we left off last week, yes, around page 25 actually, but we were about to move into the unitive way, that discussion. And we just left off talking about the three ways of mysticism or the spiritual life. We'd gone through the purgative way, said that it was, on that one, the purgative way was dominated by a period of time that deals with bringing the sensual life and passions under control. Then we spoke about the illuminative way, which is essentially, its purpose is the detachment of the soul from seeking delight in spiritual experiences and from final vestiges of ego dominance. We'll get into this a little bit more as we get to see how these things are taken care of along the way. But just for now, once again, to see that what we mean there is like, we seem, really kind of, common sense tells you, on one level, you go, okay, what do I have to deal with? There's a lot of the things I want in the world. Paul says, the spirit and the flesh contend. Mm-hmm. And they do. And so it's like, I want my way, I want what I want my pleasures. And that would be, how do you take care of your pleasures? How do you take care of the things that are your pleasures versus really coming into union with God? The purgative way. That's it. But then you kind of overcome all of those, and you think, what a good boy or girl am I. I don't give in to any of those things. I am just so holy. And then you get to that place of where you almost have a lust and a greed for spiritual experiences. People want their visions. They want their spiritual experience. They want their inner feeling. They'll make sure that they fast a lot so they can get that experience. They want those things. And that's a lust in its own for a spiritual experience now. Because once again, it's the experience rather than God. The experience of a vision is not the experience of God. It's the experience of a vision. You go, wow. And this sense is going, okay, that's what we talk about the illuminative way then is, now that you've actually taken care of you're not glutton and going out and eating all the time. You're not giving into lust. You're not screaming at people and all of that. You've got patience. You've got, some fortitude. You have these abilities to do this, some ascetic abilities and all that. That's you've accomplished the purgative way. But now it's like, I need more and more spiritual experiences. I'm going to spend all day in church just trying to get an experience. I want that vision. Now I got to deal with that. Because that's a different form of lust. And so now I'm going to deal with that so that all I'm going to want is God. That's what we're kind of getting at when we talk about the illuminative way, trying to deal with that sense of detaching the soul from seeking delight in spiritual experiences. And I just emphasize that right now because that I think is so hard for people to get. To really, when I say that, it's like, that's what you want, isn't it? That's, don't you want that? And it's like, yes, in a way, but no, you don't want to be dominated by that, or else you don't get to move on.
You don't want to be dominated by what?
The spiritual experiences. So that when you go into meditation or prayer, you're looking to see angels. You just want to see Jesus. You just, but, as we're going to look at this.
You won't be satisfied with anything less than that euphoria.
Well, but this problem is that it's your euphoria.
Right.
It's still a pleasure of the ego.
And it is putting a demand on God to appear when I want you to appear.
Yes.
Do for me what I want when I want.
Yeah, and that's why you can't move on, because you're just as hooked. You have a lust of the spirit now.
So does it mean that if you go through the purgatory way and you've, conquered that or whatever, that you're definitely going to have lust for these spiritual experiences? Or, is that, definitely what's coming after, or?
Yeah, well, it's in the sense of definitely, we all have different things. Some people don't have sexual lust, but they have gluttony. We have all different types of things, that we're going to have in that sense. But yes, there is the danger right there of going, as we're saying, I want the euphoria, I want the feeling, You know, I will fast so that I can feel the euphoria of the fast, and maybe I will see things, you know, and that. It's why I often say the danger of not calling things wrong, but the danger of sometimes of our renewals and revivals, and that's why almost every revival has gone bad, because I mean at the end of revivals, almost always they become demonic, which is like you know it's a kind of a nice seminal book. It was called War on the Saints by Jessie Penn Lewis, which she wrote at the at the beginning of the 20th century, at the end of the Welsh revival. So we see things like that. So what am I getting at is that if you haven't really, so even when you have dealt with your other things, like a lot of those people going to the revivals aren't going, well, let's go out and get drunk now, or I think we're going to go to the strip joint, or anything. They're not doing any of that. It's like you're going, wow, this is a holy meeting. Let's go to this revival and have this holy meeting. Yes, but then there's sometimes a lust for all those experiences. And when the experience dies, then you move on to the next one, or you're always seeking it, trying to have it.
Right.
And that's when you're stuck. And it's actually in a way of, you could even say sometimes that's a demonic way of getting stuck, in that place, rather than going, not this even. Not that it's wrong, it is wrong being stuck any more than we would say, we would not say food, alcohol, or sex are in themselves wrong things. It's just, how do I use them? And that's the sense. That's the mix-up. And so we know, no, but somebody can misuse alcohol, misuse food, misuse sex, and likewise we throw into that, and misuse spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
So, and are the experiences wrong? No. And that's this, like I say, subtle point we're talking about here, and we'll probably be able to get into more as we move along. But it's the subtle point when people go, but it's holy. It's prayer. I'm in church. I'm doing all these holy things. And for somebody to go, yeah, but you're going to be stuck. Or if somebody actually has not worked on what we're just talking about right now, which is really the virtues, and if they have not worked on their virtues or actually worked to some degree on their own purgation, then they just go off and get these spiritual experiences, and that's when things go really bad. So as I say, you can look at the end of the Welsh revival, which that Jessie Penn Lewis was writing about, things that really went bad in Wales and England at that point after that revival. That revival bled over to become the Azusa Street revival here, and that went bad as they started stealing the things, the members lists and stuff, and then switched and said blacks and whites can't be together, and we ended up with the Assembly of God, which is the white Pentecostals, and the Church of God in Christ, which are the black Pentecostals, that left, and it's like you go, well, wait, doesn't sound holy, as they're fighting it out. Or we come up to more, recent times and look at the what happened within the Vineyard movement and the Toronto Blessing, to the point the guy who was really attributed with starting the Vineyard, John Wimber, ended up having to go to Toronto and excommunicate the church, because that's when people were there barking and rolling, things like this and stuff like this, and you go, what started, it seems so well, ends badly. Partially because we really haven't got hold of the fact that there is what we're calling the illuminative way, that you actually have a process that you walk through. You don't give a little kid car keys. That's it. It's good to drive, and you'll want to drive someday, but you don't hand it to a 5-year-old. That's the sense. And we're kind of sometimes handing major spiritual experiences to spiritual 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so that's the danger that we have to walk through. Did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I think with this type of a thing, it's the chasing after the experiences.
It is.
Because I've had friends and people that I've worked with that it's like, if they have a prayer life and they don't feel anything, well, Christ wasn't there.
Yes.
And it's like, He's there whether we feel it or not. And it's that chasing after that experiential high, that experiential high, that experiential high. And when the experiential high leaves, then the religious life leaves
Mhm.
with it, because it's like, well, I wasn't feeling anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I
we
think
search
that's
for the
what
next
this
one.
would
That's
be.
why these revivals,
Yeah.
which start, well, again, I'm
Yeah.
not putting down a revival. Nice to have revivals. But it's that sense of, but why you hear from different corners, whether it's in the West, the Carmelites, or you hear like this author of the Cloud of Unknowing, or you hear in the Eastern Church, the Hesychasts, which all of them saying, do not go after a spiritual experience. And it hits on sometimes deaf ears, because it's like, then why am I doing this? I want that experience,
You want to
Well-
feel better.
And it's like, and
Yeah.
there's the
What
sense.
you were saying really hits home. It's hard to take.
Yeah. You want to feel
And you
better.
ha-
It's
Yeah.
especially for Americans, we're all about the feeling better.
Yes.
We'll take pills to
Maybe
feel
that's
better.
why I don't understand this.
You know, so,
I'm so like.
but it's,
What do you?
I thought I mean, like, I've always understood as you pray to God, you're not expecting anything. Like,
Yes,
it's about
that's-
you and your relationship. It's about you and your relationship. So I'm just kind of like, okay. Like, I see it as, like, you're talking about certain revivals and stuff, but
Yeah.
personally, I don't understand it, because I just,
Yeah.
Well,
I've never had experience. I mean, I know Matthew's had experience. I've never personally had, like, experiences, but I've never expected them, and I'm not
Yeah.
Well,
looking
that's
for
not
them.
what you're searching
Yeah,
for.
it's not what I'm
Right.
searching for, so I
Right.
that's
just don't.
brilliant.
Steve
and
was going to
good.
say something. Steve was going to say something.
No, I think what happens is everybody wants a certain gift from God.
Right.
That's part of it. The gift of prophecy, or the gift of words of knowledge, or
Yes.
healing, and that you seek after that, and then you bypass what you bypass God in the midst of it.
They want their badge of honor.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with those if God uses those, if you put them in the right priority.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you seek after them and then you wear that as a label or a badge, or or as your identity, then you can get in trouble.
I think if people also want to feel the presence of God, and that's not always given either.
Yeah, and that's also,
That frustrates me, but
Yes.
I've learned to be patient, probably till the end of my life.
also, it's how I receive God. I receive God, God as my Father, my King. Just say, King, make me happy. Doesn't work that way.
No, that's, but
Or even your Father, you better.
But it's that test, and that's where it even becomes, like I say, subtle down the road. Some
Yeah,
places,
yeah.
it's like this. But that's why I say we'll get into that more, because that comes, in more depth we get into as we go into this. We're kind of talking about the preliminary at the moment, kind of a structure of this, rather than getting to the depths of each one of
Yeah.
these ways. But with that preliminary, it is like we say, there is across the board, from the more 19th century, 20th century was the holiness movements that then birthed the Pentecostal, which birthed the charismatic movements. And all of these were, like I say, again, the positive sides of them, of course, things. But then it came to the lusting after the experience or after the gift. As so many times we've said, like when we look at the gifts of the Spirit, they're not gifts to us. So if I'm saying, I want the gift of healing, it just means I should want to be healed. So I might pray for you, and you might be healed. You got the gift of healing, rather than I have the gift of healing, meaning I am this person. Or I said something and it was God, and that's prophecy. Does that mean I have the gift of prophecy? No, you got it, because otherwise I've got the little present still. I didn't unwrap it. I unwrap the present, give it to you. It's not mine. And that's the sense. But when we go, it's mine,
Yeah.
these things, that's what's developed into a spiritual lust, if you will. And that's the important part here, is because the person themselves, as we'll see, does not look like a sinful person. They're not doing our stuff that we think is purgative way stuff. They're not out there, caught up in a sinful thing, and then you caught, like you say, caught them at the, peep show. You caught them, drunk in the bar. All of these things. And you think you're so holy? No, they really appear it, because they're doing the stuff that we see that we kind of call holy. But what we're not seeing is now they've moved into a new area of potential lust. which is a deeper, subtler one, a spiritual one. That's what we're gonna.
Or somebody praying to Lord for a new Cadillac or something like that.
We'll see. Well, that would yes. Now that would be a purgative way one still,
Yeah, that's what
because that's still you want your material life blessed.
yeah.
This is what I say. This would be the person that could be, giving up everything. They're wandering around with sandals on, in the cave. But what are they doing in the cave? They want the experience. That's the idea. Rather than I want God. Now that's our next. So we'll move on to that right now, which is on page 25, which is, as I ended at the end of first paragraph. Even though those in the illuminative way are to be considered virtuous, living a life more focused on God than a life in the world, still they are not prepared for a complete abandonment to God. That's what we just meant there. If you want your woo-woo feeling, it's my woo-woo feeling rather than I abandon everything to you, God. The unitive way is, as the name implies, the degree of the spiritual life at which the person is becoming more and more focused on their identity in God. God becomes the dominant focus in all things, so that in the end God becomes everything to everyone. That was from 1 Corinthians, that quote. So to get this another way, an alternative view of this same process is given to us by St. Bernard of Clairvaux. He described 4 stages to the spiritual life. The first is a person who loves himself for his own sake. This is hardly a spiritual stage. This is like, but we just call this person really worldly, and that's what that language. Person who loves himself for his own sake. This is what would be called the fully worldly man, destined for hell, one in need of true purgation of those sensual and passionate desires. In classical terms, this is the person dominated by pride, or whom we today could refer to as narcissistic, focused on personal gain and ego. It's about me, and that's what it's about. That's the first stage, or degree. The second degree or stage is the person who now attends to God, but does so for his own sake. This is the person who acknowledges that God exists, and so serves God in order that he will get blessings and not go to hell. This person of the second degree is still more interested in his own skin than in truly knowing God, and is only at the beginning of the purgation process. Virtues and right behavior are practiced and employed, but primarily for self-serving purposes. Just as be good or you're going to hell. Well, I don't want to go to hell. It's not like I'm going to be good for God. It's I'm going to be good so you don't hurt me. That's an early on.
That's more like a Christianized version of the old worshiping gods in the first place. The pagan way.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
Well, this is a stage of the spiritual life that we would say is many religions and stuff and are doing. That's why we even say, talking about the Judeo-Christian, faith here, we kind of go, people, often practice, don't go to hell. I mean, how many times we kind of, in the 21st century, in the late 20th century, got away from the idea, but the preachers would go, hey, you come to church and you be a good Christian or you're going to hell. Look at these fires of hell around you.
Right.
Or the great, early thing, like the scenes, in the Orvieto Cathedral of the Last Judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous scenes of the Last Judgment. People burning, dismembered, demons, skewering them, and things like this. And you go, whoa, what do I have to do to avoid that?
Understandably.
Yes, exactly. Well, you're saving your own skin. So it is. It's a stage of the spiritual life, but it's like one step away from just, I'm doing this for myself, but there won't be much of you left. Oh, okay, then I'll at least follow God. And then it's like, and maybe I'll follow God, and he'll give me my car and my blessings. This is the one where you try and pacify the God in pagan religions and all these things and all throughout. Pacify the God so that they don't hurt you and that they'll bless you. That's an early stage. of the spiritual life. And as you're hitting on these things, you can go, wow, a lot of people are here, really, if they're honest with themselves. This is not like looking down and saying, well, you know, pitiful things. No, this is probably a dominant level of people that live a religious life, you know. And that's still, nowadays it's not to avoid hell, but it is to get blessed. Isn't that what fills so many places?
Oh yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, if you come and worship God, you will be blessed. That's the second stage. I'm going to worship God for what I get from it, you know. And if I don't get something, even if it's my woo-woo feelings, I'm not coming anymore, you know. And if there's hardships that show up, I'm really not coming anymore. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, do people kind of go in between and back and, you know, because
Oh yeah.
I'm just listening to it and I'm thinking sometimes I feel this way and, you know, I mean, it's not a straight, you've gone through
No.
this.
One thing you'll see,
Purgatory.
especially a lot, as we go through this, is like so many things in the universe, the spiritual life is a spiral.
Yeah.
It's a spiral. It's not linear.
Yeah.
It's only linear because that's how we see it in our short distance vision.
Yeah.
But from the heights, you can see it like climbing a mountain. We'll talk about that. That's how Dante came up with the mountain, or other people, the climbing the mountain. The mountain is always big, but the sense is, it's like when you climb a mountain, you really just don't go straight up. You go around. And frankly, it's an interesting thing when I say the universe about this. About the material universe as we know it is dominated by spirals. And that spirals that are multidimensional, that are not just flat spiral. It's like climbing a mountain spiral. So what is the basis of our physical life? DNA. It's a spiral. It's a helix. You know, what is it that happens with a lot of galaxies? They're spirals. It's one of God's principles that we live under the spiral. And so our spiritual life is the same spiral, if you will. So you may start at the bottom of that mountain, and then you're climbing, and you've climbed up a level. But if you're going around, you're going to come to the same level.
Yeah.
That is what we're going to see, I say, in the book of Revelation. Because we keep coming back to the same spot, which is, I think, when we start to get into the visions of the seals, the trumpets, the unnumbered visions, the bowls, they each begin and end the same. They all end at a Sabbath day. It's like we ended at the same spot. It's like we've come to the same spot at a different level. So we're climbing it. So it means, frankly, that we kind of do pass through these things, but we don't pass through them like in Chutes and Ladders or something like that, those games where all of a sudden it's go back to the beginning. You know, that's it. You know, you roll the wrong dice, down the chute you go in Chutes and Ladders. Or what's the other Candyland?
Yeah.
Those little games, where you have to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
It's like, no, but we come back to that same place at a higher level. So, which is one of the things we just talked about, if you want to look at lust. I may have had lust of the flesh at one level. I'm going to have lust of the spirit in another. I may have greed at one level. I'm going to have greed at another. And we'll be passing through these things. And going to like Jillian's question, too, is that sense really is that place of, do we all pass through them in the same intensity? No, we all have our different, unique, draws, if you will.
Yeah.
For one person may pass through the lust, who cares? But then they get to maybe pride. You've got to know everything, So that sense. So maybe you had to know everything, about politics at one level. You go, never mind, I've given up on the worldly politics. Now I got to know everything theological, be the smartest spiritual person. And you can quote every theologian that's ever been around. And because that's pride. There's a sense of pride and a greed in that even, if you will, a gluttony of having that sense. So it can be these things. So one person goes, what? Gluttony? Yes. And so we'll see, that's the individual thing we look at about ourselves. As we look at the book of Revelation, it is that general vision given to the world. So it kind of comes out equal in some ways. But we're talking about how it comes in the individual life. So, the second degree was that. The third, the next, is the person who now loves God for God's sake. The attempt of living a life of virtue has prompted an influx of grace that, if apprehended, if grasped, leads the individual to enter the dark night of his soul. This leads to more grace and the beginning of the dark night of his spirit. Now they have entered the illuminative way. There is still an affection for the things of the world, but even a good life. But the love of God for God's sake has begun to take hold. If the person submits to the greater influx of grace afforded, he or she enters St. Bernard's fourth degree, the love of self for God's sake.
What does that mean?
Yeah. The love of self for God's sake. That is, I mean,
Is there a way to paraphrase it?
well, it's more of a description, I think, which is this: we've given up ourselves. To really give up yourself. And along the way, that goes along with that scripture, those who will lose their lives will save them. Those who save their lives will lose them. So I will lose my life. And now it's not about me. So by the end of the illuminative way, now it really has gotten to the point where it is not about you at all. It's all about God. But there's a new insight that comes. God does not want an empty vessel. If we left it as just, I'm emptied, now I'm kind of at a place of almost Eastern religion. I've entered cosmic consciousness and I've lost my identity. And God is, in this one, in the unitive way, at the end of it, it's like, I have not lost my identity. I've found it, but I've found my truest identity with God. And so, at the point of going through the illuminative way, you've actually lost caring about yourself. You've kind of lost that. And God's going to say, but I love you. Now I want you to love you too. It's kind of the final fulfillment of love your neighbor as you love yourself. And we haven't loved ourselves.
That's right.
And so we now get, through God's eyes, who we really are. And we can love ourselves. And it's almost, it seems like with your question, paradoxical. Because isn't it that we're trying to give up self? Actually, that's why we use the word ego. We've been trying to give up ego to finally truly love or be in union with ourselves as well. Now, one reason this is really hard to get is because it's so far from most of us.
It's
Everybody in this room, I think, probably has not gotten to the intuitive way to understand this. So it's like, it's very theoretical at this point. But in that theoretical place, it's the steps, the 4 stages. I just love me for me, and everything's about me. Stage 2, I love everything about me, and I want to save my skin, so I'll worship God and get blessings from it. So I'm going to appreciate God because God's going to help take care of me. Stage 3, by the end of it, I'm going to love God just because God. So I don't need any experiences. I don't need any blessings. I'm just going to be, I love you, God. That's it. Stage 4, God loves me too and wants me to be a complete individual with Him.
And to value yourself then.
Well, now
through him.
and it's that true self now. That when we earlier on drew the big circle and said there was a little circle inside, and that little circle inside is the ego of the true self. Now you love the big circle. And now we come to the place of the different meanings of love. One of the nicer meanings of love is desiring the best for the other and working towards it. But you can actually get much more philosophical and mystical at this point, that love is not just a behavior like that, or an attitude. That love is union. And that's really the deeper meaning of love, which comes out in Ephesians. That's like, when why marriage is the image of love. That the two shall become one. They are two, but they are one. And they are one, but they are two. And that sense. And love creates union. And so to love oneself is to actually find that union within oneself too. Mm-hmm. So all those disparate parts what I've described as the grand committee of the internal life, you know, which doesn't listen to each other. You got your politics over here, you got your different groups, and they're all screaming. Nobody listens to each other inside. By the end of the unitive way, you actually have a coherent, harmonious choir within. That is you. And it's beyond the first person word of I. That's why Paul will say, I know a man who went to the third heaven, whether in the body or not, I don't know. It's like his ego has to talk in the third person about who he truly is in the presence of God. And so we get to that place, and we're united within ourselves. We've loved ourselves. We've brought ourselves into harmony. And that's a huge task that it's almost hard to envision, except in these words I'm kind of giving. So at the end of the unitive way, we're not only united with God, but we're actually united with ourselves. And that true self now is in union with God. And that, frankly, was always our destiny.
Yeah.
When you think about it, Adam and Eve were true selves.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took on an identity of consciousness, if you will. They got split apart. That's what happens when you know good and evil. You get split apart into the opposites. And that kept splitting into dualities. So it is like, and all of a sudden, and it's like, that was the idea. Wait a minute, we're not one anymore. You're naked. You know, something. And it's like, wait a minute, you look different than me. Yeah, that sense. And it's that sense that I've split, that we're trying to reunite, so that God says, I wanted the true self to walk with me in the garden. And so finally we've made it back. We've loved ourselves as God loves us. That's the fourth stage. It's deep stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Realizing, like we just said a few moments ago, how most of our religious life, and what we call our spiritual life, but our religious life in Christianity, Judaism, and most of the other religions are maintained at that second degree of the spiritual life. I'm in it because I want stuff from God. And I realize there's a God, but it's to my benefit. And so when we're at that second stage, it's even really kind of hard to understand the third stage, and much less the final. For example, again, how often the idea of what I just said is the cloud of unknowing way of meditation, prayer, sounds so boring, really, if you're honest. Or even the Hesychast Eastern one, the cloud of unknowing way of prayer. Close your eyes. Just to go into the darkness within, and with your feeling of love, reach out. That's it. What do I get from it? No. Just do it. What happens then? That's the way. Our questions come up because we're at second stage thing. What really? That's second stage. Or just go, I'm sick. It's like, but we do that. He's like, this is useless. So we go, I want to do intercessory prayers. I'm going to get to intercessory prayer groups where I can really feel I'm good. And then I'm going to call up and find out if the person got what they were praying for. And then I'm going to go, yeah. And then I'm going to do petitionary prayer, and I'm going to see if I get something from it. And then I'm going to go into, what we put quotes around as worship, and have great music, and I'm going to get really good stuff, except that music was the same music from 2 years ago, and it's now boring, so I need some new songs. Mm-hmm. And so, because I need to get something out of it, And it was like, that's where we're at, that second stage, spiritual life stuff. So that since we're mostly there, this other is really difficult to go. Just reach out and be there with God. Mm. Be still. Yeah. And you will, but be still. And that second part is what we usually lean on. Where are you then? I want to know you. Where are you? No, just be still. Someday you'll know that I am God. When? Second stage. So rather than the illuminative way, at least. And so that's when you find these things out. I say kind of a little ahead of ourselves, but this is always going to be worth repeating. We're going, what do I mean I want it? What do I need from it? I guess I need some sort of affirmation of myself. I need to feel good at least, and I need, oh, you're still after your stuff.
Mm.
Okay, I need to purge myself of my desire to have the good stuff and the feeling. You know, what is it?
Or the
It's kind
desire
of a,
to feel like you're an intermediary for God.
or then if you like, and what would that be? Pride.
Mhm.
So I got to deal with pride now. And it's not even horrible pride like narcissism. It's the subtle levels.
Mhm.
It's, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, these are really subtle. Like I use the word pride because it's the biggie, but it's a subtle pride, isn't it? It's like, because it's also good. I want God to use me, and so I'm going to be that channel for God. Good. But then I have to deal with the fact of how much am I getting out of being that channel. That I will relinquish. And if you never want to use me, so it's kind of like Paul,
Mhm.
kind of going, and if you will save these people and you send me to hell, that's okay.
Mm.
It's like, that's at least the one of loving God for God's sake and meaning it. And it's like, and if you never use me as a channel again, it's okay. And that's why I think, you know, my own kind of take on people misunderstanding now Mother Teresa, reading the Mother Teresa from our points of view.
Mm.
She was depressed because she never got another word from God, and she didn't get a lot of experiences from God ever again, except for the one of saying, I'm sending you to the poorest of the poor. And then she gets convinced, and she gets her wheelbarrow, and she gets to do it, and nothing else. And it's like, yeah, good. You know, you're just loving God for God's sake. You know, and we go, poor Mother Teresa, second degree. Mother Teresa was beyond the second degree.
Mm.
And yet we go up that mountain, and so it's like, yeah, I wish I had it, but I don't need it. You know, the people that say, I wish I had it and I have to have it, are the ones that left her.
Mhm.
And she died in the ministry,
Mm.
you know. And so you kind of maybe think about it, but then you relinquish it again,
Mm.
because you're much more in that third of, I'm just doing this for God. He's the one that sent me here. It's not for me. Oh, shouldn't I have more experiences? Or other people, well, Mother Teresa, when it would be like, did you save a lot of people? No, didn't try to. Did you see healings? No, they just died. What are you doing? What a useless ministry, you know. And that's, I mean, the people would say,
Yes, okay.
they would. I mean, there are many people saying that, you know, well, at least you should have been, you know, preaching, you know, and evangelizing those people dying and saving their souls at the last moment. No, God just told me to hold their hands.
Mhm.
And you did that for decades? Yeah. You didn't get anything out of it? It's like, that's what I meant, that she didn't get anything out of it. She got a lot out of it. She was living that next level life, which is why they could actually go and canonize her
Mhm.
and say, you know, we kind of think you're into that unitive way. And so we call you that a saint. And so now she's Saint Teresa of Calcutta. But we, from our own point of view, know we couldn't do it. You know, I need some sort of reinforcement here. And then we go, and
Yeah.
Bernard of Clairvaux goes, no, you don't, if you move on. And so I deal with that pride or whatever. Nothing's got to get. No, it's for you, Lord.
Yeah.
I'm really meaning it.
In that particular sense, wouldn't there be like an intense knowing at the depth of who you are that this is what it is? You're not really wanting or desiring anything else from God. You're just like, but you have an intense.
I think so. Maybe I'm not sure I use the word intense because that kind of gives a sense of a blessing,
Yeah, but there's
rather than just a knowing, which
it's just like
just a knowing, which is what else can I do?
yeah.
It's kind of like the apostles not leaving Jesus, where, you know, on the 6th
Yeah.
chapter of John, which is, well, everybody else left me because they all think I'm crazy. What are you guys? Where else are we going to go?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know where else to go.
Well, I
And
remember
and-
reading about Saint Teresa that for a long time she felt the absence of God
Mm-hmm.
and put up with it
Yeah.
because she was supposed to.
Yeah. Well, there it is, and that you know it deeper. That's the knowing, is like it's the experience of God. No, but the knowing is at a different level. That's when we really can say the difference is a movement beyond ego consciousness.
Yeah.
There is at her in her depths, in her essence, in the depths of her soul, we'd say knew something.
Mm-hmm.
Did the ego experience? That's why I kind of balked at the word intense, because the ego wouldn't feel the intensity. It might feel a complete abandonment,
Right.
and yet try and leave. Like I often think, it's like play this game with yourself sometime. For most of you hearing this, you could play this game. I think somebody right barely into the second degree of spiritual life, they might have trouble with it. But the game is this: decide that God doesn't exist, and live that way tomorrow. And even right now, decide that God doesn't exist. Forget all this stuff. God doesn't exist. Really be a good atheist. There's already, and even when I say that, I'll just give you my personal experience, it's always like a coldness in my heart comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and an emptiness in life.
Mm.
And I'm going, wow. And so we go, yeah, those are valid experiences, so why am I cold and why? It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work to do that, to be a good atheist. There's something cold and empty, something that gets meaningless, and it's like that sense. And then I just want to, then I really want to go to the first degree of St. Bernard, and I just think I better be narcissistic and take what I want. And then I really feel more miserable. And so if we really go, where does this misery come from? It doesn't come from social convention, because today's society would say, you're stupid for believing in God. Some people would. But I mean, I was almost on a societal level, people like to hide that they believe. But most people do believe in God. And stuff. But still, it's not societal, it's not that you'd be rejected, it's not this. There's something deep within that I'm saying that comes from beyond the ego that knows. And for you to live otherwise is to be so kind of essentially self-wounding
Yeah.
that you can't do it.
Mm.
And if you do it, it's your misery. And so that's when we go, there's something deeper. And in the end of the unitive way, we've gotten in touch with that deeper. We identify with the deeper, no longer with the shallows
Mm-hmm.
of our ego identity, of our personas and roles and stuff. And that's the sin. That's the process we're about on this whole thing. Go a little further, and then we'll take a break. These three ways, and I'm on page 26, are presented in one of the greatest poems of European literature, composed a few hundred years prior to St. John of the Cross and almost 1,200 years after John's vision. This was Dante's great A Divine Comedy, of which we spoke earlier. There Dante illustrated these three paths with his descriptions within the three divisions of his work: Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. With these mystical paths in mind, we can see the structure of the book of Revelation as an unfolding of the spiritual life. The letters to the churches comprise the preliminary excursion into the purgative way. These letters describe the virtues and attitudes necessary for progression across the degrees. In St. Bernard's conception, it is as if these letters are speaking to those in the second stage or degree of the spiritual life, persons who want to avoid hell and gain the blessings of God, but who still have not fully detached from the senses or the internal passions. Temptations still dominate, and techniques, that is, prescribed behaviors, need to be intentionally introduced to deal with them. Following the letters, the vision enters into the purgative way proper, with the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets, describing the process of the dark night of the soul. After an interlude of 7 unnumbered visions, the book of Revelation progresses to the dark night of the Spirit, the illuminative way, explicated through the vision of the 7 bowls. These give way to a description of the unitive way set forth in another set of 7 unnumbered visions. We'll get to those in a second, in that sense. That's what we're going to be going through most of the rest of this work, is those visions that we're going to look at. But as we said earlier, there were these different sets of visions as we really put them out. You know, it's the 7 letters. It's the prologue, as we went through. Then the letters to the 7 churches, all these 7s, right? Remember, said, which moves into, you know, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets. Then you get 7 unnumbered, and unnumbered we'll see are because they're not numbered. Like, and the 7th bowl was poured out. Well, this is just, it's not said that, but it's another set of unnumbered. So now we've got 7. We now have 4 sets. You know, letters, seals, trumpets, unnumbered. Then comes 7 bowls, right? And then after the 7 bowls, another set, 7 unnumbered visions. So we have 6 of these sets like that, a prologue and an ending. 8-fold. The book of Revelation is put into 8. And the 8th part of the book of Revelation, remember what 8 means?
New beginning.
New beginnings. So we have, it talks about the whole new beginnings right there. Now we're going to go through these letters and the virtues. Would you like this to be, it's 10 to 8, would you like a break right now, and then we'll come back and finish up looking at the virtues in the letters. So take a 5-minute break. Especially since you're all yawning.
I
Sorry. But, you know, I know it wouldn't be a lot, but, I mean, is it? Yes,
Well, I'm
I mean,
sorry,
I
I
would, because I thought
should've
about
closed it.
having on what I'm already doing,
Yeah.
because. So, I would, I'd love to, but, you know, yeah.
So continuing on, we're on now page 26. With this pattern in mind, we may now return to the letters to the 7 churches, looking to them for instruction about attitudes and behaviors that we are to embrace prior to entering into the deeper aspects of our spiritual development. After 2 millennia, much of what we hear in the message to these churches will sound familiar as the cardinal virtues from ancient Greek philosophy and the theological virtues articulated by St. Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Certain ones are given special emphasis with specific messages. Love is highlighted in the letter to Ephesus. Faith is seen in most of these messages, but with clarity in the letter to Smyrna. Hope is emphasized in the letter to Philadelphia. Smyrna, again, showcases courage or fortitude, while perseverance and patience are underscored in the letter to Thyatira. The letter to Thyatira also illustrates justice, while prudence or wisdom can be deduced from the message to Pergamum. Added to these virtues are zealousness and mindful awareness, found in the letter to Laodicea. After interpreting these messages, we are now able to condense the directive to 8 principles. The first, associated with love, is to be motivated by love of the good rather than hate of the evil.
Mm-hmm.
So we went over when we looked at the letter a while back.
Yeah.
The second, associated with humility, is to remember that Jesus is in control of heaven and earth, to look to Him for guidance, staying faithful to His directions. We're reminded to rely on Jesus alone rather than to be self-reliant.
Mm-hmm.
To rely on one's own abilities or one's own works places a person in danger of taking God for granted and not seeing the need for a devoted life to Jesus. In that case, a person becomes lukewarm. The church and the individual must be single-mindedly devoted to Jesus. So we have our first 2 of the virtues of the 8 things that we need. So if we're going to take up essentially an armor, if you will, as Paul might taken it, or as the attributes we need to enter into the depths of our spiritual lives and into the heavenlies, we need first love, then humility. These 2 are of an utmost importance. The third principle is to stay faithful in the face of persecution by people who believe that they are following God. Now that's a tough one, isn't it? It's easy to stay faithful from the persecution of people that don't believe in God or anything like that. You go, well, I'm going to stand for God. This is actually faithful as well as a person who say they are following God. This may even be the subtle persecution by loved ones, thinking they know what is best for you, and for them, the spiritual life may not be that best.
Mm-hmm.
St. Francis and his troubles with his father would be an example of this. In more overt ways, this persecution may include economic hardship, imprisonment, and death, to be dealt with by faith, perseverance, and fortitude. Mm-hmm. In a similar manner, prudence can overcome the avarice and greed that may lead to compromise. Mm-hmm. Now, you know St. Francis's story is he was first wanted to be a chivalrous knight. You know, as a young man, a teenager and stuff, he and all the rest of the youth went off to do battle from Assisi in Peru against Perugia, I think it was, and that they're going down to the other city-state, because these little villages, hill towns, just were all their own countries, and they fought each other. So he's riding out and doing all of that, and Assisi loses, and so they're in prison, and the parents and all of Assisi have to pay a ransom to get their kids out of jail and come home. And so, but while he's in there, he actually finds an illicit copy of the Gospels. Mm-hmm. And so he reads all these things. And so all of a sudden he changes from being just a normal kid of Assisi, and his dad was an upper-class merchant, really, the merchants with that. And so they had a lot of money, and they were clothes merchants, and he had been helping out and all this, but they were good religious people, and stuff. And so Francis decides he really, wants to live just the life of the Gospels. And so his dad, one day, proverbially takes him by the ear and drags him in front of the bishop and says, talk some sense into him. and this boy, and he goes, and Francis is just going, I'm going to follow Jesus in the Gospels. And his dad's like, I clothed you, I fed you, I've done that. You will just follow a normal religious life. Go to Mass, be a good guy, be a good merchant. I've given you all this. And so Francis strips all his clothes off, standing there naked in church in front of God and everybody and the bishop, and says, no, I'm only Jesus's, and walks out.
Wow.
And is known as the nuthatch, from that point on, and stuff, and things, going through all these things, until after quite a while and stuff, people start to go, there's something about this guy, and a lot of the youth start to head down to him, including one of the most beautiful girls of Assisi, Clara. And so she goes off and becomes St. Clare, and stuff, and starts the Second Order Franciscans and all this. But I mean, that's the story.
Must have been a lot of confused parents.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, but it is that idea of, here is they drag him in front of the bishop, this type of thing of saying, and so you have to stand firmly in what's been delivered to you, the faith, even in the face of the church. Now, sometimes that's not as hard today, because a lot of times the church is the most persecuting thing from different reasons. Either you're not being politically correct, or you're going to get so strict and stuff, that type of thing. And you just have to go with what God delivered you. Continuing on, the church is told it will also be facing persecution from the justice systems and governments of the world. In dream language, to which we return at the moment here, it indicates that the path to be taken will be actively inhibited by the outer life and culture. Governments, that says. As St. Paul relates, the spirit and the flesh will be in conflict. Therefore, the church is instructed to maintain the justice and ethics of the gospel alone, not allowing itself to be polluted by compromising with unjust governmental or pagan practices, even if this defiance means death. The fourth principle is to live by Jesus' guidance on what true justice and ethics are when the world's governments persecute you for not following their concept of justice and ethics. Now, we haven't outlined what those exactly are here at the moment, but it's this sense of getting into what this idea exactly, which is there is an ethic and a justice that we'd say is God's, and that is Christian. And that is held, rather than trying to, well, this is what, got to put up with, type of idea.
And that we are still to respect the position of ruler,
Yes.
so it gets a bit complex.
Yes. Well, and that's one of the places when we go. When does the outer government type of thing? Now we're talking as a general thing. How does the real governments and justice, things like that? When do they come into conflict with the sense of what we would say is Christian? Okay. So if we talk on a world level, we're saying when does the government come into conflict? And that would be like today we'd say, well, the government may come into conflict by saying you can't pray in the public square.
Right.
You're still going to pray in the public square.
I think you
But-
know what the difference is.
Well, that's it. Or like Jesus made it sound, which is the sense too, which is now it's not conflict. The church didn't tax you. Caesar taxed you. The government taxes you. You pay your taxes because it belongs to the government. It's their laws. It's not in conflict with your justice or ethics. So you pay your taxes. And that's it. So deliver unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. And that's why I say prayer in the public square is God's. And so you get nailed for it. Okay. But if you go, I actually believe that my taxes are being used for unjust purposes, that's not for us to determine. That's the government's money. It printed it. That's exactly what Jesus said. It's like, did you print your money? No, but I worked for it. Yeah, but did you print it? It belongs to the government. Give your taxes. And so a lot of times there's been a lot of times, kind of like, what's it called, passive resistance or active resistance even, where it's like, no. And that's when we go, when Paul says, honor the authorities, or Jesus says, deliver unto Caesar what's Caesar's. But then if it says, worship me, worship the government, no. No, well, we'll kill you if you don't burn incense to Caesar. Then you're going to kill me.
Right.
That's the idea. But, so
Part
we
of it's
kind of know
the
that
fact
way.
that because we choose to live in societies,
Yeah.
therefore there's a ruler.
And sometimes you have to make the opposite about the person. David and Jonathan were in that kind of dilemma.
Even what?
David and Jonathan were in that kind
Oh.
of dilemma because even though Saul was trying to kill David, King Saul was still the anointed of the Lord and he was still the king. So
Well, that's it. But that's the sense. So, but and with this, then, so what we're talking about once again is trying to get hold of this place of guidance where we don't end up compromising too, with the governmental systems. Now, this is when we're going to say this is also the compromise internally. Now, we just talked about this in a general, cultural way for us individually or as a group. But what about this internally, then, in dream language, as we said? Then it's this sense of you're going to feel sometimes compromised. Like, something, I want to be liked. The outer culture says we're not going to like you if you actually, hold certain principles.
Yep.
And so you go, I will hold those principles and I will be rejected. That's the internal one for us individually. It's not so much that it's going to, imprison us like a government can, but it imprisons us psychologically and spiritually in the way we go, well, if I say that, I'm going to get in trouble. Like today, in this recent, this month's or year's thing, you almost can't say anything without being sexist, racist, or something like that. And you go, just speak. Just relax and speak. Have your orientation and your guidance from within, rather than, oh, but I've got to be so careful. And that's the sense. It's not that justice that's controlling me. It's not that that's going to control me.
Right.
It's this integrity from within that's going to control me, whatever happens. And so that's the subtle place where we get it. I mean, like I say, the obvious ones are burn incense to Caesar. Don't you dare do a public display of faith or something like that. And stuff. And this today maybe is in those grander sense. If you're living in right now a primarily Islamic dominated country, it's even more pronounced than for somebody in the West or the United States. But that's still that sense of, no, I've got to be myself, and I'm going to, whatever it means. The persecution will come. Don't conform, or you'll be lukewarm, as it says. Yeah. The fifth principle, also associated with justice, is not to be seduced by power or wealth, compromising what Jesus has taught. Once again, prudence and temperance will overcome avarice and greed. That's how these virtues deal with the vices. The danger here is that Christians will be seduced to seek to rule over others, the present world and the world to come. All of these pursuits and desires are to be seen as coming from Satan. They are presented as occult, magic, and demonic. Any comment about that? That one should mess with some people's minds. But
Yeah, the millennials.
Yes. Yeah.
They want to rule and reign.
Exactly. And they're so looking forward to judging others and ruling over others and stuff. That it's.
How's that going to work?
Yeah. And that's where it's saying. Basically, it's saying it's not. It's not going to happen. That's not what the kingdom of heaven is going to be ruled like that. In that sense.
It's very easy, I find, to judge others and forget that I've been guilty of the same
Yep.
sort of sin
Yes.
in my life.
Yep.
Very easy to do.
That's right. Along with the temptation of seeking worldly power and wealth is the desire for spiritual power. This seduction comes in the form of being taught that spiritual power and advancement will be accomplished by certain secret teachings. There is a seduction to know the deeper things or the secrets of God, not already taught in Scripture or by the apostles, even to understand the ways of Satan.
Talking about certain kinds of Gnosticism.
Certain Gnosticism,
Cults.
There's cults that come up, yeah. Yes. Or New Age things that really fit in, which is Gnosticism, types of things of that nature. Or even some churches where there are inner circles.
Right.
There are inner circles of people that will be taught more and that will be therefore considered more spiritually advanced and closer to God. And so, and even those, like if you really just come to every service and really give enough, you're going to get it. And you might actually get some of the better teachings and things, and be invited to the better groups, the inner groups. These things are out there in what you would say is your normal, it's not just your cult that's coming at you, though it's cult-like, but it's, you wouldn't think of it as a cult.
Is there a certain amount of secrecy in the Mormon religion?
Oh, there's a lot. Like you can't, if you're not a Mormon, you can't go in the temple. You can't see some of the things.
Right.
It's supposed to not be revealed. There's there's books out there of people that have exposed and stuff, but it's kind of like the same thing with the Freemasons, these
I
things.
mean, I know some very, very nice Mormons, but
Yes.
the religion always seems to be kind of shrouded in shrouds.
Well, you only know a certain, you have to be inducted and indoctrinated to certain things in order
Levels
to
or
know them.
something. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, and so that's the sense, or, and then there's just things in our church wise, but it's like this books. I mean, like, quite literally, a number of years ago, The Secret came out,
Right.
published. Everybody wants to get hold of The Secret,
Right.
and that's going to be the blessing for you,
Right.
and that you can know these things, or these secrets of how to have different visions, something like that, in order to get the spiritual knowledge. The Secret itself was more of a material, kind of prosperity thing. But these are these things you're going to get to know it. But now I say this is the sense of people really want to study the demonic or something like that. I know they'll have all the names of different demons, and they'll get it into things like this because it's like, I know the spiritual world, things of this. This is a technique to get into the spiritual world. People will misuse things such as the interior castle of Teresa of Avila, and say, well, if I can just get to the fifth mansion, then I'm going to get these visions. And again, it's that idea of even the sense of why is it that you actually personally buying that book or doing something like that, or going to that retreat or something in order to get it. It's like, because I want that, is it I want to know God better, or is that I want a spiritual experience? I want to have this stuff. And I've seen this more often with people, like I say, that are in the deliverance ministry. They really want the power to fight Satan, and then they're going to do all these things. And so, but it's what they're really doing is saying, I want that power. The sixth principle articulated in the letters is that the scriptures of the Old Testament and the teachings of the apostles are sufficient for salvation and for coming to the fullness of life promised in God. There is no secret knowledge given to special Christians. That's that. The seventh is that the church must not dilute or compromise the way of Jesus Christ in the ways of the world or of paganism. The warning comes because the church will be tempted to take on the role other religions formerly held in society. Religion had merely been an adjunct assisting in the worldly life. The church is called to live differently, keeping itself pure from the new religions, the compromised religions of mixing the world, paganism, and Christ. Again, now, we're talking about this, and we've actually are applying this very clearly to the general world right now.
Right.
As you think about this for your own individual life, that same thing is going on. Is how much is it that you kind of are walking in many places? It's one of the things heard more recently again from people, and that I never understand, because they've gone through usually these two times I'm thinking of as going through Catholic school, high school, some college and stuff, but it's been raised, and yet still go, maybe reincarnation's right. Maybe that's true. And so it's a mix. And that's the sense. Well, it's kind of interesting. Or how many people get into mixing them, or we do individually, as a groups. I mean, it's like that sense going, well, yeah, but I can kind of use this technique for that, and I kind of believe in, I'm half Buddhist, and I'm half Christian, and or I'm half, all these things, and I'm going to do these things, and maybe that works, and it's like, no, it's like that, and that's where we're going to go. You can't mix this in your own personal spiritual life, nor as the body can't.
I have a friend who describes himself as a pantheist, but really gets upset if he can't have the Eucharist. I think. Okay.
This is the mixed upness that we kind of say in that sense. That's really mixed up. Like I say, when I say about reincarnation,
he's a seeker, but still, he's at a stage that's uncomfortable for him.
yeah. But and that's where we say, as this principle is, don't dilute or compromise. That's the sense. You got to stay with what has been given, what has been revealed there, and not add to, and stuff of that nature. The eighth and final principle is one that has caused both trouble and consternation over the past 2,000 years, for good reason. It's a dangerous one. Applied inappropriately, and that's the important thing, this principle easily lends itself to anti-Semitism. So that's, like I say, this one's you got to be careful of. What is emphasized here is that the church is the renewed Israel, the true temple of God. St. Paul made sure in his letters to accentuate the fact that even though the Jews had rejected Jesus as the Christ, this did not mean that they were rejected by God. Which is an important thing. What's that?
Also, some Jews rejected.
Well, if they didn't,
Some did.
all Jews did, if you're still a Jew. You're not a Jew anymore in that sense that we're talking about. You're a Christian then.
We don't have Jewish Christians.
No, how can you be a Jewish Christian?
Well, there's the
Oh, I am.
the
Now,
Messianic.
that's
I'm a
new.
Jewish Christian.
Messianic Christian, but you're still a Christian.
Yeah.
A Christian, by definition, is a believer in Jesus Christ. And this is what we're getting at right here. Let me finish this then, and we'll get to that. What is emphasized here is that the church is the renewed Israel, the true temple of God. Now, you can't have two temples of God, an old Israel and a new.
But
That's
we
the
don't
difference.
have a temple. And
What's
Jews,
that?
Jews don't have a temple.
They won't.
Not anymore.
So let me finish. You're ahead of me.
We're getting caught in the weeds
Yeah,
here.
don't get in the weeds. St. Paul made sure that I told you that part. He highlighted the reality that Jews were not in themselves evil because of their rejection. However, because this new church was persecuted by the Jews, especially by the leaders of the local synagogues, the church would have the tendency to separate itself from Judaism and perceive itself as a totally new religion. That was the danger. They weren't a new religion. The fledgling church was warned against this reactive tendency and instructed to hold fast to its identity as the true Israel, even in the face of persistent persecution and its seemingly insignificant stature, the church's stature. The church, and therefore each Christian, is the presence of Jesus, the presence of God, the presence of the temple, and the presence of heaven, as long as it manifests the faith. This is where I say this is a new phenomenon of Messianic Judaism. It's really not Judaism then. Judaism does not believe in Jesus. And that's the thing. And if you're a Jew that believes in Jesus, you would become a Christian. Now, you may be getting mixed up with culture. That does not mean you are a European, or German, or an English, or even a Russian, or something like that. But the mistake today is made between the two. And the sense of going, like, there is no temple, but a lot of people want to see the temple rebuilt. How can the temple be rebuilt? Well, that's, that sense. It's really saying Judaism is, and often is prayed this way, the older brother, which you always want to see redeemed. And so that's why the church is always praying for that. And God, is always chasing after his people. That's the idea. But the sense of, you can't say you're a Christian Jew anymore, you can say you're a Christian Buddhist. It's that idea. That's the sense. Why? Because Judaism is based, and why the Orthodox want the temple rebuilt, on the sacrifice of the temple. When the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, Judaism turned into what's called Rabbinic Judaism, which is now synagogue-based Judaism. But the dream is to rebuild the temple. That's why there's always such a tension in Israel, because the Orthodox would like to remove the mosque from Temple Mount and rebuild the temple. And then Israel would be reestablished. No. The church is Israel. And that's the difference. I mean, this is, like I say, this is a tough one, especially because we've become, there's a lot of reasons, this sense. But when you realize it's the new Israel, the church is the new Israel, that there's not two equalities, which is, Paul ends up throughout the book of Revelation, ending up calling the synagogue of Satan. And that's why I say anti-Semitism came out of that stuff. And a misunderstanding that because the Jews rejected Jesus, they were rejected. No, God never rejected the Jews. And always will see them returning in that sense. So it's a tension there. But in that tension, we can't fade to the other side and go, oh, they're the real Israel, and the church isn't. That makes the church a new religion, rather than Jesus is the Messiah of Judaism.
Right.
I can
And so, if you follow Jesus, you're following, that's Israel, that's the Judaism, that's the people of God.
Right.
But then we go, and those people of God now are no longer merely ethnic, neither Greek nor Jew, male or, all this stuff. That's the meaning of the Gentiles being brought in. That's the Jesus message of the New Testament. Now it's the whole world. You were the representative priesthood, Hebrew people. Now it's the whole world brought in. Israel is the church, and the temple of the Holy Spirit and of God is the
It
church.
gets confusing though when there's an ethnic Jewish culture,
Yes.
which is very real, and there are some members of that ethnic Jewish culture who are atheists.
Right. Well, see, there it is. That's why we have yeah.
Totally.
So
And it's just like, well, in
Or
that sense.
Buddhist, or
Yeah.
Or Buddhists, yes,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of Buddhists.
Well, that's
too.
where we go.
Yeah.
The difference between culture and Israel, the
Right.
true Israel, the new Israel, is not the country over
Okay.
there.
Well, even super religious Jews
Yeah.
don't even
Orthodox.
They
yeah.
don't see Israel as Israel. They're like they live in the settlements or whatever. They're like they don't care anything about Israel because it's not. It's just like the secular thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where we get this mixed up today. But a lot of Christians also, like I say, this last injunction of what happens is one of the safety things. If you actually misunderstand this, then you actually misunderstand a lot that comes later. Because what happens is this: if you like when Satan is enthroned later in the book of Revelation in the temple, well, that means that we're waiting. People go, well, then the temple has to be rebuilt in Israel, and then Satan will be enthroned in it. And it's like, but if the new Israel is already defined as the church, then you'll see that actually the devil and this evil comes through the church. And you see a lot, kind of, look at all, maybe it's not even this may be only the pimple of it, but when you see all the child abuse and stuff like that, and the atheism, all this, the awfulness at times comes through the church, it's the temple. And individually, we are the temple. And so we have to watch for actually that sense of how does that get enthroned in us sometimes, the carefulness of it. But we actually, once again, project all this into this outer world material, where Jesus said very clearly, and Paul, where do you find the temple? You are the temple. Jesus said, rip this one down, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. This is the temple. I am the temple, he says. I will rise in 3 days, and I, and therefore my body, is the temple. We are the new Israel.
even
And-
though there are maybe 100 Christian denominations or call themselves
Well,
Christian,
the
temple
church.
is still us.
The yes, yes. Well, that's another issue. That is another issue. But unless you start to fall into the place where you go, we're the only Christian denomination, it's right.
Right.
Wherever Christ is in the heart
Right.
Okay.
is the temple. And the church is the body of Christ, is Israel.
Right.
And so that's why I say we, for good reasons, especially we sit here today after probably one of the pinnacles of anti-Semitism in World War II. And the sense of that in solidarity, everybody goes, never again. That type of idea,
Right.
that this will never happen again. And therefore, we're actually, in a good political way, bend over backwards to make sure that doesn't happen again. But that political good way does not influence theology. And our theology has been influenced by it then, to the place where you can say there's a Jewish Christian, and there's like that, and that's like, so when we do the definitions, what would would the top rabbis define as a Jew?
Right.
And you say, well, but we're Christian too. They go, no, then you're a Christian. And what would a Christian define as a Christian? One who believes in and is filled with Jesus Christ. And so you go, there's therefore there's Semitic Christians, there's Arab Christians, There's Celtic Christians, there's Germanic Christians, there's Chinese Christians. We're talking, therefore, a ethnic heritage.
Okay.
There's African Christians, you know, all of these things. But to put two religions together
Okay.
is the compromise.
Mm.
And there's the sense. And right at the beginning, like I said, we've left this, and this is an important thing of understanding when we talk about the new Israel. There's an old Israel and a new Israel. The new Israel is the church. And therefore we are Israel,
Mm.
the people of
Of
God.
God.
There are not two peoples of God. That's the difference, you know. And stuff, you know. And when, like I say, just thinking it through and struggling with it, and I want to once again say we have good reason to struggle with this today, because we see that Christians were the ones. I mean, they weren't really Christians, but they sure went along with it in Germany. I mean, when you think about all the things that would happen, it's like Christians could justify it, even though Hitler and all were much more in the occult. They were not anything Christian.
They could
Bible burning.
cave into the pressure.
Yes, but the church didn't stand up for the Jews. And so we as the church, you know, and things came out later, which was the Barmen Declaration and stuff like this, where the church said never again. We were too late in waking up. But and so for good reasons, we're careful. But as we walk through the book of Revelation, if you see that you go, well, there's the synagogue and then there's Christians, then you're falling into what this eighth principle is trying to say. Do not miss, this is not a new religion. It's a new religion according to the Jews. It's a cult. It's the same as, you know, that type of thing. It is not a new religion according to Jesus and God. It's the continuation that comes with the New Testament, which is, again, a heresy when you got rid of the Old Testament. Obviously, and some of those were trying to get rid of it. No. Why is the Old Testament valid? Because the church is merely a continuation. It's not a brand new thing. It's now the renewed Israel. So, wow. Okay, with that, we got we're almost finished with this chapter. We'll finish it next week, and we're moving to the 7 seals and move up through heaven. Did you want to say something first? Oh, okay.
No, good.
Very good. Okay.
I'm gonna go home and crunch my chips.